That was Sarah Alvarez from Stribling and Associates, and you are listening to Stribling's New York on WOR AM 710 on your digital dial and iHeartMedia company. If you need to contact us, contact our producer, Tony Simone, who is sitting here in the studio with me. T. Simone, T-S-I-M-O-N-E at stribling.com. So happy Mother's Day again to everyone, and tomorrow morning I will be boarding a jet to Las Vegas. I'm going to be flying myself. Of course, I'm taking a plane to Las Vegas. And tonight we have a guest who knows more about Vegas than anybody else on the planet. Bill Friedman has written a book called 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. He's on the phone from Nevada. Welcome, Bill.
Hello.
So tell us about your book. And Vegas is it the most popular destination in the country these days still?
It is certainly one of the top ones, and for convention goers, it has over a third of all convention goers in the country every year end up in Vegas.
And it used to be the place where you'd go and, people are like, you can have a buffet for $5. Now, one of the finest French restaurants in the world, Guy Savoy, has an outpost at Caesar's Palace.
Yep.
So there's, been a lot of things that took place over the years, and you wrote an amazing book, which you were kind enough to send me, and it really talks about how Vegas was started. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've spent my whole life in the gaming business, and the three largest gangs in Prohibition, and these guys were just huge. They brought in nothing but the finest booze from all over the world, and the two biggest were in Manhattan. And when we get to the leaders of it, your audience will probably have heard of them well. But I grew up either working in the casinos that they had or their associates had, because they built 80% of the hotels on the Strip, the seven leaders of these three gangs, for 20 years, from the opening of the Flamingo in 1946 to the opening of Caesar's Palace in 1966. And the two biggest gangs, the number one was headed by Charlie Luciano, and
A.K.A. Lucky.
You got it. And his four partners were Ben Siegel and Meyer Lansky and Joe Adonis, and a man who kept a very low profile, probably not known by many people, Vincent Allo. And
now you're talking about the mafia, right? This is the mob.
Oh, yes. The two Jewish members, Siegel and Lansky, could not join, but they were the advisors, and the up until Prohibition, the American Mafia was 100% from the Sicilian island. No mainland Italians were in any of the 24 gangs, and they brought in Luciano because he was such a big moneymaker, and made him the lieutenant, and he brought in his two Italian partners so that they had the first two mainland partners, and he brought in his competitor. Even though these three gangs competed, you've never known of people that worked closer together. They partnered in things. They protected each other in the political mess of the underworld. And so Costello became Luciano's lieutenant. And then after Prohibition, for the 15 years till they moved on to Vegas, they ran across America. Today, as open as they are today, illegal casinos, very high-end, more elegant than anything on the Strip today, fronted by the finest restaurants and nightclubs. And my book goes through these 30 years of Prohibition and then the illegal casinos and the glamorous world that these guys lived in.
Must have been some party.
Well, Luciano, Costello, and Siegel all had suites at the most expensive address in the world at that time, which was the Waldorf Astoria. And, they were powerful political kingmakers. We've just seen how the local political kingmakers can control things. Well, back then, these guys were more powerful. Luciano and Costello were the most dominant kingmakers in Manhattan, when over half the wealth of the country lived there. And, of course, it was the financial center, and all of these major financial business people, union leaders, they were constantly surrounded by them because they were in a position to do favors.
Well, I have a little trivia question for you. So, since we're sponsored by Stribling and Associates, which is a top residential real estate firm in New York City, there was a mobster in the 60s that lived at a very famous address, one of the best residences still today on the Upper West Side, the Majestic, and at 115 Central Park West, and there was an assassination attempt on him. And it may have been Joe Bonanno, or it was a Costello. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to go.
In 1957, there was an attempt on Costello.
Then it was Costello, and it was at, I guess it was at the Majestic, because supposedly there's still a crack in the marble in the entranceway that they never fixed from where the bullet lodged. I guess they took the lead out.
Could that have been an annex to the Waldorf at that time?
No, the Majestic is on the west side.
Okay.
I know that Bonanno, it may have been Joe Bonanno. I know that Gay Talese wrote a great book called Honor Thy Father about the Bonanno family.
For a period of time, he claimed he was kidnapped. The exact details never came out, but I don't remember him being shot. But
we'll Google that later. But it's an interesting sidebar. So my question is, how realistic is the movie Bugsy that Warren Beatty made?
It couldn't be more fictional. I lived in the culture these guys created, and it was the most wonderful time. Everybody kept their word till 1980. No one in Vegas had a contract. It was all handshakes. All nationalities got along with each other. You never found a Jew in an operation without an Italian partner. You never found an Italian in an operation without a Jewish partner. Same thing went for the Irish. And I lived in this. This isn't something I heard about, and it was their value system. And what's unbelievable, these 7 guys became the most powerful men in the history of organized crime, and yet they preached from their earliest days. They were totally against violence. They said there's enough to go around for everybody. All killing does is create more animosity. People have brothers and uncles, so there's more killings. They preached against vendetta. They preached against monopoly, and they lived it their whole lives, and I grew up in that world. They were the exact opposite. And remember, they were political kingmakers. They got along at all levels. For the last 14 years of his life, Ben Siegel was the number one dinner guest by every Hollywood producer and actor, and the top businessmen in Beverly Hills. They all fought to have him at their dinner parties because these guys knew how to get along with everybody.
Well, one of the great ironies is, if you go back to the Teamsters and the mob in Vegas, is that Bobby Kennedy tried to prosecute Jimmy Hoffa because he was loaning money to the hotels from the Teamsters pension fund at a great rate. There was really nothing illegal about it, and it became a practice that's become regular business for a lot of people today. So he really pioneered that, and of course Kennedy couldn't prosecute him because he didn't do anything wrong.
Now, in terms of the loans, there was nothing wrong with those. As you said, they got almost twice the interest rate, and none of the hotels went broke. They just had a tainted image because of the ownership.
Right.
And so the Teamsters Union got a great return because of the bad reputations, not because they were risky loans.
Right. I mean, one of the ironies is that there's always questions now with pension funds because bonds don't pay what they're supposed to pay, but with those loans to the, I don't know if it was to the mob, but to the hotels, they paid back handsomely, and the pension fund really profited wildly.
Yeah, the loans went to many different people, some of them very legitimate and some of them total gangsters.
But the gangsters did an efficient and effective job of running Las Vegas. One of my favorite lines in Albert Brooks's movie Lost in America, when they comp him to a suite at I can't remember I think it was at the Desert Inn, and he said if Liberace had children, this would be their bedroom. and I remember that a friend used to go to the Desert Inn all the time, and they used to comp him to a suite with an actual swimming pool in the suite. So I don't know, I hear the big suites now are fabulous, but there was something about those old days that are very nostalgic, and I guess will never be recaptured.
Yeah, and it was a smaller town, and it was totally customer friendly. The employees were just totally friendly to the customers. If you came into a casino the second or third time, they all knew your name. It was very personal. I lived through all of it, and it was just a marvelous place.
Well, I don't know if this is an apocryphal story. A friend of mine loves to tell this. You can tell me if this is made up or not. Now, he claims sometime in the 1970s he was going to Vegas for his first convention, and a friend of his said, nobody that works in the casinos wears watches, so you should ask somebody what time it is and see what happens. And he said he was checking into Caesars, and as check-in, he said, excuse me, can somebody tell me what time it is? And the people behind the front desk looked at him, and then someone came out and said, hi, I'm the manager. You the guy that wants to know what time it is? And he said, yes. He goes, it's somewhere around noon. I've always loved that story. I don't know if it's true. I hope it is.
All the employees had to have watches. I was a dealer for years, and then I managed for years. Everything was done on a strict time schedule, so the employees had watches. What they're talking about, where that story comes from, the early casinos had no clocks anywhere, so that the customers had no idea what time it was. And for years, the books would say, they're Machiavellian. They want to keep the people confused that the sun's coming up and all of this. And the fact was, a player that's seriously in action doesn't want to be pulled out of his reverie, and he didn't want to know the sun was coming up. If he had a clock in front of him, it made him go home. The players originally told the casino operators, we don't want the clocks in these places.
Well, now I have an internal clock that always puts me to sleep at 10:30 every night, no matter when and where I am. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. This is very educational, and I really recommend your book to everybody. And do you have a website they should go to? I have a website, Bill Friedman, Friedman, author.com. And my book, the print version's $19.99 at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. And the ebook is $4.99 at every retailer. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and perhaps our paths will cross in Vegas one of these days. It'll be great. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.